collection of books was considered the greatest in the Greek world. And
he had a big library, a private library himself. Like
and Strabo says that Aristotle taught the Ptolemies the collection of books.
Yeah, yeah.
So in a spiritual way,
yes.
we consider Aristotle an inspiration to the Ptolemies in the building of a universal library. This was the first time that, you know, the concept of a universal knowledge and universal library really materialized.
Yeah.
The most important element in the connection, the spiritual, the intellectual connection between Aristotle and his pupils, his impact on their mind. The way of thinking. That way of thinking could ultimately disagree with what Aristotle thought, but the way of thinking is a secret of reaching the truth, understanding things as they are and not as they were told to be.
Yes. Well, I have to say the most important thing is that together they read Homer. This is beyond doubt. Alexander's copy of the Iliad was Aristotle's edition of the Iliad, and it is here, sitting here, that the boys will have heard in detail the wondrous stories of the anger of Achilles, the terrible loss of Patroclus. It is here with Hephaestion, his future Patroclus, that Alexander is fired again by the ideals of the Homeric world with which he lives and which motivate him as they later pass to the next great natural king in Greece, in the Hellenistic world, King Pyrrhus in Epirus, also motivated by the same Homeric heroic world as Alexander.
The fundamental, the basic knowledge here was based in two parts. First is the meaning of endelechia.
Endelechia.
It means in Greek αυτό το τέλος έχει. To have insight, the proofs. The other part is virtue. The main education. That means to have knowledge, to be intelligent. The second is to be brave. The third is to have justice, to believe to justice. And the fourth, look, very, very delicate meaning. If you are going to make some good to someone, don't do that waiting for some reverse donation.
He combined also esoteric knowledge, because generally speaking, Greek culture had both sides. Like it had Apollo and Dionysus, it also had the rational and the irrational in perfect balance. It is the balance, the element of balance, which we found in sculpture, in everywhere in architecture, in poetry, in the way of thinking. And would you say that Aristotle combined this balance more than, say, the other great philosopher, Plato?
Plato usually started with the idea and then tried to work it down to earth. Aristotle started with facts.
That's right.
In all his works, he is collecting past history.
The first scientist.
Of botany, of animals, of politics. I mean, collecting facts first. And examining the facts, he comes out with a conclusion which is better than the other, or which is the cause of the event.
Which is the scientific approach.
And we see this very practical approach and realistic approach. Alexander, throughout his conquests, he had an eye on nature and used, and he accompanied with him another battalion of scholars to examine,
botanists,
to
a lot of
study,
botanists
and engineers. This is really the impact of a great mind on a developing great mind.
And I don't think of Aristotle really forming Alexander's scientific mind. Homer has the greater impact on Alexander's soul and relationship. But of course, everything said on the Aristotelian method is true. But the one thing we know, I come back to it, is that they studied Homer. Yeah. And that is so important. Alexander seeing himself as the new Achilles, and the rivalry with Achilles, the idea natural to him of knowing no fear, standing in front of the army. But you must remember the boys are young. By the time they are 15, 16, they have left. And normally advanced philosophical studies would be waiting until you are a bit older. Here at Pella, the image and memory of Alexander remained vital in the Hellenistic world. People kept small marble statues of him, either figures modelled like Alexander, with the small horns of Pan, the idealized head of Alexander, modelled on the portrait of himself, which Alexander, like a great film star, had controlled with his official sculptors, or memories of great days in his service, the great mosaic of the lion hunt, showing that moment when Craterus the Macedonian had saved Alexander, the great lion king, head-on in conflict with the lion, and possibly the mosaic in the very house of Craterus's Macedonian family, where they could look down on their grandfather's great exploit in the days of service with Alexander, or dine in a nearby house with the image of Dionysus as if coming on an Indian leopard, as they had discovered the traces of Dionysus in India, in Alexander's army. His memory, his ideal, his idealized beauty, and his achievements lived on for 300 years and more.
Yes, indeed. We are standing here in front of this statuette of Pan in the image of Alexander, and I can connect it with the masterpiece of the head, of course, and the undaunted courage of the lion hunt, and of Poseidon. The image of Poseidon is of special interest in the Hellenistic period. He was identified with Osiris of Egypt, and there was a widespread idea that the origin of the gods were great men. And according to Diodorus Siculus, that Osiris, alias Poseidon, went through the world as far as India, teaching mankind, civilizing mankind by teaching them agriculture, the growing of wheat in particular, the taming and breeding of animals, and reading and writing. This is a model made on the image of Alexander and his experience. And here, if he is represented as Pan, he is again a reflection of his deification as a universal God of nature.
Il reste un autre domaine que nous n'avons pas évoqué, du moins en détail, qui est la langue. À un certain moment, nous l'avons dit, je crois que la langue grecque est la langue du pouvoir. Et en tant que langue du pouvoir, elle est utilisée dans tout le domaine. Mais jusqu'à quel point est-ce qu'elle subsiste et si jamais est-il possible d'affirmer qu'elle a survécu à la fin des structures politiques grecques? Georges.
Oui, c'est difficile. Ce qui est difficile, c'est de dire à quel moment l'usage de la langue grecque s'est véritablement perdu. Mais il est facile de prouver qu'elle s'est maintenue au-delà de la disparition des structures politiques grecques. Pour l'Asie centrale, Paul Bernard parlerait mieux que moi, mais on a des attestations de l'usage du grec nettement après le début de l'ère chrétienne. 1er et 2e siècle, les attestations sont sporadiques, mais elles sont nettes. Pour des régions plus occidentales, les régions de l'Iran occidental, on a un magnifique texte qui concerne la cité grecque